This is Chthonia, the world of the dark feminine.
Hello, this is Breege Burke. Before we get into this week's podcast, I would like to thank my patrons personally. Politi, John H., Tanya T., Veronica S., Jeffrey B., Gabby, Helen M., Sunny H., Scott K., JRM, Susie G., Eldritch Priest, B. Lupita, C. Roberts, Jeanette, DS, Jake B., CDV, Allie, V!V, Mary Beth R., Ida B., Eric N., Tana, May, Christine F., Alex C., Samantha G., Alcanet, and Teddy O. I really appreciate those of you who have joined recently and who have stuck with me over these years. Our community is small, and there's so much I would like to do in terms of providing courses, conversation on the dark feminine, and extra content, so please consider joining at patreon.com/Chthonia. Now on to the podcast. Hello and welcome to Chthonia, the podcast that deals with the dark feminine. I'm your host, Breege Burke, and the topic that we are going to be looking at for this week's podcast is Pandora. Now, we've talked a bit about Hesiod's theogony in this podcast before, about the creation of the world. I talk frequently about the marriage, or really just the intimacy of Uranus, the sky god, and Gaia, the earth mother, and the difficulties with their relationship that caused them to eventually be separated by Kronos, the god of time. And once you have that separation, you have the condition for life, really. You have the earth and the sky are now separated, and now we have the preconditions for a world that is understood in terms of time and in terms of measurement. Now, this has to do with a very ancient period of Greek history Greek mythological history anyway, where when we are talking about the creation of mortals, and we're talking about the war with the Titans. So the war with the Titans takes place between Kronos, who is the god of time, sometimes equated with Saturn, and his offspring, whom of course he has been devouring. As soon as his children are born, he swallows them up, including pretty much the majority of what we think of as the Olympian gods. Now, his wife, of course, Rhea, gets very tired of this, and Rhea gives him a stone to swallow and saves her child Zeus, and he's hidden away in a cave in the underworld until he comes of age to be able to challenge his father. And when he does so, an episode takes place that is known as the Titanomachy. Now, the deities of this time were largely known as the Titans. And as I've said, the Titans tend to represent these kind of fundamental forces, these building blocks, not only of the world as we know it, but of primal consciousness, really. Our understandings of measurement and of different facets of the cosmos. Our original sun gods and moon gods and goddesses and things like that all come out of the lore of the Titans. And among these Titans are two Titans that have to do with forethought and with, I guess one might call it afterthought, but really just a total lack of thought. And these two Titans were named Prometheus and Epimetheus, and they were brothers. Now, in the actual war with the Titans, many of the Titans ended up being confined to the depths of Tartarus for their transgression. Although, of course, Kronos himself becomes king of the Elysian fields in the underworld, so that's another whole separate subject that might be talked about elsewhere. But after this war, Zeus really becomes king of the gods, and then this is where we start establishing the idea of the cult of the 12, the cult of the Olympians, which is a solar cult. The idea of the cult of the 12, which doesn't originate in Greek mythology. We see an example of this, for instance, in Hittite mythology. There is a cult of the 12, which definitely predates the Greek 12 Olympians. And we see 12s all over the place. You have 12 apostles of Jesus, for example. You have the 12 imams of Islam. You can probably think of dozens of other examples, but yeah, this idea of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? 12 gates of Jerusalem. There's all these ideas about the 12, and has a very strong solar inflection because, as opposed to a lunar month, a lunar year, which has 13 months, 28 days each, solar months, there's 12 of them in a year. There's 12 what we think of as months in one solar cycle around the sun. So, yeah, when we talk about the way in which we construct our lives, when we measure things, the way we distinguish between day and night, the way we distinguish between the seasons, all of this has a solar kind of inflection. So the sun tends to be fairly central here. And the sun becomes a symbol also of an ordering principle. Okay, the idea that these are deities that organize us in a way that enables civilizations to flourish, enables us to have families and lineages and kingdoms and for the cycle of the year to go through. And eventually, it builds up into city-states and nations where you have kings and empires and things like that. This kind of anthropological shift in things is something that takes place due to an increasingly complex system of ordering. So we can think about the ancient myths to a certain degree as reflecting, metaphorically at least, what we are talking about in terms of that ordering principle. Okay, so one of the things, though, we haven't really discussed in detail when we talk about Greek myth has to do with the creation of mortals. Now, obviously, in the Bible, we know about the creation of Adam and Eve, and there are myths within the, for example, of Enki and Enlil in the Babylonian and Sumerian mythology, and the idea of mortals being created to do the labor for the gods. We have all of these different ideas about the creations of mortals. But in Greek mythology, the Titan Prometheus is tasked with creating human beings. And what it is he's tasked with creating them, and he creates them very similar to the biblical narrative out of clay. So he breathes life into them. He gives them fire. He gives them an upright posture, similar to the gods. And in fact, human beings end up being made to some degree, at least in this interpretation, as being similar to the gods in terms of their appearance. And again, this is something we also see in the biblical system, where we see human beings being created. They made in let us make man in our image and likeness, and that, of course, gets into the whole idea of the multiplicity of gods that the Old Testament actually implies, at least early on. Later on, they try to say, let us make man, Elohim, let us make man in our image and likeness. So regardless of that, because again, that's another rabbit hole I'm not going to get down in this podcast, we definitely have the idea here that that you have these mortals who are created. They are created out of clay, and Prometheus, who is the god really of forethought and of clever thinking, is the one who breathes life into human beings. So it's not Zeus, it's not Kronos, it's not Uranus, it's not any of these other deities. It's Prometheus. He's given the task by Zeus. Now, the creation of mortals becomes a sort of problematic sticking point between Zeus and Prometheus. And one of the things that Zeus does not want to give to mortals is fire. And fire is really a technology that you need for warmth. It's something that you would need to cook food. There's a lot of reasons why fire is somewhat essential to our ability to live. Certainly in Aristotelian idea of elements, fire, air, water, and earth. We definitely see fire as being something that's very essential to us. And actually, if we're speaking of solar mythologies, the idea of sunlight, the fiery sun, and the warmth of the sun, is also something that will be equated with the idea of fire and the need for such warmth for life to actually flourish. So Prometheus actually very cleverly manages to steal fire from the sun, and it gets kind of passed along, and he sneaks it in a reed, and he brings it to human beings for their use. Prometheus and Zeus are, even though Prometheus was not imprisoned with the other Titans after the Titanomachy, he and Zeus have a consistent kind of beef with each other. One of the things that Prometheus does that really ticks Zeus off is there is a sacrifice that has to be offered to the gods. And you will see this in a lot of these early myths about the mortals and the sacrifices that are owed to the deities. So he tricks Zeus. He creates, puts a sacrificial offering where one of it is covered with something that looks like a nice layer of meat, but it's mostly bones and fat. And then another one that maybe doesn't look quite as good, but it is actually the more substantial portion. And Zeus ends up choosing the one with the bones and the fat. And so Prometheus does things like this. And again, this is his nature. He is a deity who's very clever. He knows how to get the best of the king of the gods. And Zeus is not particularly appreciative of this. So there ends up becoming this back and forth, this almost battle of wits between the two. So after Prometheus gives fire to human beings, he decides he's going to get revenge by creating the first woman. Now, mind you, the implication here is that, therefore, mortals up to this point were all male, which is kind of weird when you think about it, because it's like, okay, well, how then were they going to reproduce? If there were if there wasn't any females, even among the gods, there were male and female gods, right? So how are you going to reproduce? But Zeus decides he is going to get back at Prometheus, and he commands Hephaestus, the blacksmith of the gods, sometimes known as Vulcan in the Roman. Yeah, and he felt, okay, so I'm just reading here. I'm open to theoi.com, and I'm looking up the Pandora story. And I'm just going to read this little bit, and then we'll kind of, not really totally backtrack, but then we'll go through this. It says, the Titan Prometheus was once assigned the task of creating the race of man, or humans. He afterwards grew displeased with the mean lot imposed on them by the gods, and so stole fire from heaven. Zeus was angered and commanded Hephaestus and the other gods to create the first woman, Pandora. So, of course, Hephaestus, as the blacksmith of the gods, created her physical form, right? So the implication, the implication here is that the woman is not created from clay, that she, in fact, is forged in some way by the smith of the gods, the metalworker of the gods. And he endows her with beauty and with cunning. Okay, now he's going up against Prometheus, so there's this idea of this woman as being cunning. He then had her delivered to Prometheus's foolish younger brother Epimetheus as a bride. Now, it's worth noting that, as I think I said before, if Prometheus represents cunning and cleverness, Epimetheus is the total opposite. In fact, I think when I first studied this myth, he was kind of described as kind of, he's a bit dim-witted, let's put it that way. And so he's actually somebody who's more, if Prometheus has to do with forethought, Epimetheus has a lot to do with afterthought, with like afterwards going, oh, whoops, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So he tends to act instinctively in the moment and doesn't really think about his actions. So after the deliverance of the gift of fire, Prometheus knows that Zeus is probably going to be out to perform another trick to do some kind of harm to mortals. So he says to Epimetheus, look, whatever you do not accept any gifts from Zeus. But then when he brings this beautiful woman, he's just kind of like, oh, yeah. Now, I should mention, okay, Pandora has a little bit more of a richer description here, because the fact that she's called the All-Gifted implies that she has been given gifts from all of the gods. So I'm going to read this. This is from another Dictionary of Greek and Roman Biography and Mythology. This is on Theoi. Zeus, in revenge, caused Hephaestus to make a woman out of earth. Okay, so he does make her out of earth. That was not clear from the other. So, yeah, okay. So she's not made out of metal. She is made out of earth, just like the other mortals, who by her charms and beauty should bring misery upon the human race. Aphrodite adorned her with beauty, Hermes gave her boldness and cunning, the gods called her Pandora, as each of the Olympians had given her some power by which she was to work the ruin of man. Okay, and I'm trying to get the full list here of what she had. Okay, he bade famous Hephaestus to make haste and mix earth with water and put in the voice and strength of humankind, fashion a sweet, lovely maiden shape, like to the immortal goddesses in face, and Athena to teach her needlework and the weaving of the varied web, and golden Aphrodite to shed grace upon her head and cruel longing and cares that weary the limbs. And he charged Hermes, the guide, the slayer of Argus, to put a shameless mind and deceitful nature. And so he ordered. and they obeyed the Lord Zeus, son of Kronos. Okay, so this is from Hesiod's Works and Days. He does talk about this in the Theogony, and then he also gives this more detailed account in Works and Days. Okay, so anyway, just to get the idea of what she looks like here. The goddess bright-eyed Athene girdled and clothed her, the divine Charities and queenly Petho, or Persuasion, put necklaces of gold upon her, and the rich-haired Horai, or the Seasons, these are all attendants of Aphrodite, crowned her head with spring flowers. And Pallas Athene bedecked her form with all manners of finery. And Hermaeus the guide, slayer of Argos, contrived within her lies and crafty words and a deceitful nature at the will of loud-thundering Zeus. And the herald of the gods put speech in her. And he called this woman Pandora, all gifts, because all they who dwelt in the Olympus each gave a gift, a plague to men who eat bread. But when he finished the sheer, hopeless snare, the father sent glorious Argus slayer, meaning Hermaeus, the swift messenger of the gods, to take it to Epimetheus as a gift. And Epimetheus did not think on what Prometheus had said to him, bidding him never to take a gift of Olympian Zeus, but to send it back for fear it might prove something harmful to men. But he took the gift, and afterwards, when the evil thing was already his, it's interesting how he talks about the woman, he understood. For ere the tribes of men lived on the earth remote and free from ills, which are called kakoi, it's evils, and hard toil, ponoi, and heavy sickness, nosoi, which bring the keris, or fates, upon men. For in misery men grow old quickly. But the woman took off the great lid of the jar. Now this is it. Okay, she's given a pithos, or a jar, later described as a box, and this is really a later mistranslation of the term. Although the idea of the box is still somewhat interesting here, so we'll go back to that. So she has this jar, which she has been commanded to never open. Okay, so of course the myth of Pandora is that after she's married to Epimetheus, they do have a daughter together called Pyrrha, who her name actually means fire, interestingly enough, and it's her and her husband Deucalion, who is actually a son of Prometheus, who are the ones who actually survived the Great Flood, and they are the ones who repopulate the earth by throwing stones over their shoulders after Zeus has wiped out the earth of mortal men and women. Or I don't know how many women actually. Maybe to say men was more accurate then. But okay, but before this Great Flood, as Pandora is married to Epimetheus, she takes her jar, and of course she's not supposed to open it. This is her one instruction, but she can't resist. And when she opens it, there's two different versions of what happened when she opens this jar, this pithos. One is that all evil and sickness and anxiety and everything is released into the world. And it sounds like these are daemonic type beings. And I don't mean it in terms of demonic. I mean, although you might interpret some of these things that way, they're daemonic beings. They are these conditions that tend to afflict the mind, but also to afflict the body, sickness and so forth. So they all come flying out of this, and by the time she slams the lid back on, the only thing that remains in the jar is elpis, which is hope. Now, that's a very interesting thing, because if it's the idea that hope is what's left in the jar, there's been a lot of scholarly questions and a lot of philosophical questioning about what that actually means. She's released all the evil in the world, but hope is the only thing not released into the world. It's been said that the idea of calling elpis as hope may not exactly be a correct translation. The word anticipation is probably a better term than hope, because it's the idea of expectation. That expectation is what... There's a sort of implication there that perhaps a certain good or bad result could be expected, but hope is always the possibility that there could be a good result, right? Now, there's another version of this myth, apparently, where it is said that the actual circumstances of opening the jar are reversed, that she actually releases all of these good things into the world, but that hope is the one thing still that remains in the jar. And so we have to ask first the question of, what does that exactly imply? If she's released all of these things into the world, okay, if she was this gift of the gods who comes to Earth and ends up releasing all these ills on humanity, or she releases all of these good things, but there's still the implication that the one thing that's left in the jar, it almost creates a factor of uncertainty. This is that hope is maybe the one thing that's hidden. It may be the one thing that, or anticipation, that one factor that always makes us maybe a bit uncertain, but perhaps it is the better side of uncertainty. Because if we are absolutely certain of a doomed result, then there's nothing but despair, right? But if we have hope, then even something that is bad, perhaps we have the sense that what's hidden away, what's still the mystery in the box or in the jar, maybe a different outcome, perhaps, maybe a different result. Okay, so there are a lot of arguments about what it means for hope to remain into that jar. Now, of course, Hesiod ends this analysis by saying, only Elpis or hope remained in an unbreakable home under the rim of the great jar and did not fly out the door, for ere that the lid of the jar stopped her, and by the will of aegis-holding Zeus who gathers the clouds. But the rest, countless plagues wander among men, for earth is full of evils and the sea is full. Of themselves diseases, or nosoi, come upon men continually by day and night, bringing mischief to mortals silently, for wise Zeus took away speech from them. So in other words, these are ills that don't announce themselves. They come quietly. So there is no way to escape the will of Zeus. Okay, so yeah, and there's another version of this in the Theogony, and there are some others. There are other discussions as well in the Iliad and the Theognis, Aesop's Fables, and Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound. Obviously, this comes up, and there's several other Roman writers that allude to this myth as well. But the thing that I find interesting about the Pandora myth, okay, her box aside, or her jar, okay, just kind of backing up and thinking about the implication of this. Now, first of all, Hesiod, it said, is not the first writer to actually talk about this myth, that this may have been a story that existed before he actually wrote it down, and that this is his version of it, okay, and the idea that woman is the one who brings all evils into the world. It is worth noting that Hesiod, and I do talk about this in my book, Hesiod's a little bit of a grump. If you compare his writing to Homer and the tone of his writing, he treats the muses as beings that he should distrust, and he tends to have this very negative attitude towards women, as do many of the early philosophers that you read that are probably, I don't want to say contemporary with Hesiod, but probably earlier than Plato. You do have a lot of them that tend to have this very, very sour attitude towards women, like, women are the ones who ruin everybody's life, and they make everything terrible, and they have this, they do this, and they do that, and they cause all these anxieties. So I don't know. These are men, I think, that you have to wonder about what these guys were like, because they definitely have this, they seem to have this real chip on their shoulder with regard to women. Like, womankind's bad. They bring all evil into the world. There's definitely a misogynistic bent there that's hard to ignore in all of their writings. And a general pessimism about life in general. So Hesiod is, He's a little bit of an interesting source for this, although, like I said, the Theogony and Works and Days are the oldest source that we have for this particular story. But let's think for a minute about the idea of the woman as the one who brings evil into the world. And again, remember, this podcast is dedicated to thinking about the dark feminine, and the reason why femininity seems to be such a threat to people, that there's a need to somehow keep. Well, femininity, obviously, we're talking about the archetypal feminine, but why it is something so terrible and so threatening that we have to control it in some fashion or force it to submit in some fashion. Pandora is sometimes said in certain versions to be a kind of an earth mother, that she has another epithet besides Pandora. Like, Pandora is the name that she has, but she is also, there's a white calyx in the British Museum where she is referred to Anesidora, which means she who sends up gifts. And there are some images of her, ancient images, where when she comes to Epimetheus, she doesn't. Now, it's interesting. She's created by the gods. Now, she is created out of earth, okay? Earth and water. Supposedly, that's what Hephaestus makes her out of. But did the gods make her on earth, or did they make her in the heavens and send her down? because the images of her show her coming up from the earth. It's almost like she rises out of the earth, like, I don't know, like she's on one of those risers that they have when they, people come out like in concerts and things, and they bring them up. There's this thing that she just rises up out of the ground, and there's the implication there that she's something that grows out of the earth. And it's also said that Anisodora is another epithet for Demeter, certainly. If not, and I think there's another goddess, might also be Gaia, but yeah, certainly when we talk about Gaia or Demeter, yes, I just found the note down here. Yeah, that's another epithet of those goddesses. So there's almost the sense that Pandora is an Earth Mother in some way. Now, if we think about the underworld, okay, so the fact that she rises out of the earth doesn't suggest that she's actually a celestial figure, but a chthonic one, okay? And we've talked about the idea that the feminine is something that belongs to the earth. I mean, yes, you do have female goddesses who live in the heavens, but certainly femininity in terms of human femininity, in terms of sexual charm and things like that, or things that are connected to perhaps fertility and things like that, are things that rise out of the earth. Grain and stuff grows out of the earth, right? So it's almost like the idea that she is this being that grows out of the earth. It's also worth remembering, now remember, she's adorned with all of this rich jewelry that's given to her by these various daemons and demonic type beings and goddesses. And it's worth remembering that the rich jewels and gold and things like that come out of the earth. They're mined out of the earth. The Roman word Pluto, which is the name for the god of, at least one of the names for the god of the underworld, comes from Pluton, but also it's connected to the word plusos, which has to do with wealth. And there are conceptions of the underworld. I'm thinking of the Hindu conception of the realm of the Nagas, of the Serpent Kings, and or Nagarajas in that case, that live underneath the earth, and they said their realm is brighter than the earth that is exposed to the sun, because the gemstones under there shine so brightly that they shine brighter than the sun. Okay, so we definitely have this idea of riches as something that come from under the earth. So there's the implication that this is a woman endowed with material richness. She has a traditional, I guess we'll say, astrological Venus-type energy, which not only has to do with beauty and luxury, but wealth as well. She is the sort of this embodiment of not only beauty, but of material wealth and luxury. So, and we know that, okay, if we think about other civilizations within that realm, within that geographical realm, that area, and within those time periods, we definitely still have almost the idea of the woman who is richly adorned. In the Bible, for instance, in Proverbs, they refer to her as the foreign woman, who will lead you down to Sheol, which is to the underworld, right? Which is to the Jewish equivalent of the afterlife, which has nothing to do with heaven or hell. It's probably more equivalent to Hades in terms of what it is. They will lead you down to Sheol, right? They are representations of death in some way. Or even the representations of the whore of Babylon, right? What is she? She's drunk on the blood of the saints, and she's adorned with all of these rich jewels. This is the idea of the feminine, the seductive feminine, as being something that leads to your ruin. And whether this originated with the Pandora story or not, I mean, it's really difficult to say. I don't really know that we can establish that, but it certainly seems to be a motif or a theme around the feminine and femininity. Now, there have been some mythological writers, I'm thinking most notably Jane Harrison, who tries to suggest that these are the myths that show the shift from matriarchy to patriarchy. But again, I'm always dubious of such claims, because I don't think that this dramatic shift ever really happened. I'm still, I know some people have tried to get me to revisit Gimbutas and some of these other writings and say, oh, no, you should take a second visit of this. I think there's evidence, and I still don't see there's being any evidence. What I think about the myth of Pandora is that this is another one of those myths that is connected to the soul, and I have a couple of reasons for thinking this. So we're talking about Pandora as a mortal woman, okay, as just a beautiful woman who's actually created like she's an object of some kind, okay? And so we talk about the objectification of women. This is definitely the woman who is created as kind of the shiny object that Prometheus just, takes into his life without thinking about it. And what this really is, in my view, is this is another view of what we'll call the Jungian anima. It's the soul projection. And I think what this myth really illustrates is the problem of the soul. It's the problem of the way in which human men in particular, now we're going to say human heterosexual men, just to be clear, because obviously when we're getting into gay men or gender fluid or trans people, we're talking about a whole, there may be nuances of this that can be applied. So just for argument's sake, we're just going to talk about men who are attracted to women. You have this, there's this projection that goes on. When a man sees a woman and falls in love with her, it's said that he is viewing the best qualities of his own soul. He sees them like a mirror projected. And this is something that's very shining and beautiful. But the way in which this interaction between men and women occurs, we can almost think about it like a mating dance, right? When we think about other species and the way in which, say the men may prance around in a certain way to try to attract the females, or there's something about it that feels instinctual in a way. But I also think it's something that it represents. It's like looking in a mirror. It's like we looking when we have relationships with people, not just love relationships, when we're attracted to anybody, when we go to a social gathering and meet somebody and we think, wow, that person's really cool. I want to, get their email address and, maybe we can, hang out sometime. And it may not even be in a date situation. This could be, it doesn't have to even be a man-woman kind of a thing or any kind of a romantic kind of a thing. It just has to be, where we just want to hang out because I think you're cool and I have a good energy from you. Like even in situations like that, to a certain degree, we're in a hall of mirrors. And when we look around and see the qualities in people that seem to represent our strongest or the things that are the most beautiful in that soul image, we tend to see them in other people. And when you fall in love, regardless of who the person is that you're falling in love with, there's a projection onto them. It's almost like they're a screen onto which you can see that beauty of your soul. And it's said that men, again, we're just sticking with sort of heterosexual context here, but it is said that men have a feminine soul and that women have a masculine soul called the animus. So it's like whatever you are biologically, it's the idea that your soul is the opposite. I don't know. I've often thought with gay men or lesbian women that perhaps it is a little bit of the reverse going on there. Perhaps gay men, for example, have more of an animus, right? And lesbian women maybe have more of an anima. I mean, I don't know. There's other discussions about that, which again are probably outside the realm of this podcast. But when I think about the projection of the soul, that's when you see, that person is beautiful to you no matter what they are, okay? And the thing is, once the projection's withdrawn, which inevitably happens, it doesn't matter. I mean, if the couple, whether they stay together, whether they break up, whether they decide to, live together, get married, whatever it is, the projection at some point is withdrawn. And then you are left with the regular person. And that regular person is somebody you're either going to gravitate towards or not. They are either going to be your type or not. You may look at them at that point. You think about how if you fall in love with somebody and then all of a sudden one day you're not in love and you're just kind of like, oh, well, what did I see in them? You have this withdrawal that takes place, and it's not something you can consciously control. It just happens. I mean, sometimes our minds take over and get in the way of things, but we have this thing where there's this projection that's there and then it's gone. Now, the projection is never sustained. And this is the thing. This gets into the problems and the difficulties of sustaining relationships. If we are talking about people who wrote these stories of Pandora, who were men, talking about women, it's this problem that women have certain charms. And because men are not able to evade those charms, in other words, they don't have control over their soul and their soul projection, then it's a hateful attitude towards women and all the things that women cause, right? But I think this myth is interesting in that if we look at titans like Prometheus and Epimetheus, and if we look at what the titans imply and what a figure like Pandora implies too, and what's in her jar, and of course, then you have the motif of the one forbidden thing, the taboo that's broken or violated. This is a motif that you see in folklore. It's something you see, in the Bible, don't eat the fruit of that tree, right? Bluebeard, don't look in that closet. There's this whole thing about, the one forbidden thing. You can do anything, but you can't do that. And that is the one thing that your curiosity is going to drive you to do. And in a way, it's almost a type of reverse psychology, because the expectation is by whoever ordered you not to do it, it fully expects that you're going to do it. Okay? And that in doing this, when you make this kind of a discovery, that this discovery is going to lead in some way to some kind of a tragedy. And I think really what you're doing, what we see here is that we're able to see the underside or the hidden side of thing. Okay, if she comes out of the earth, we think of Pluto or Pluton. Okay, again, now Pluto in traditional astrology tends to represent those things that are in shadow, right? And again, whether you believe in astrology or not, from the point of view of symbolic associations, I think it's important to think about that. There's the idea of what is hidden in the underworld. Right? When we talk about underworld deities like Hecate, for instance, what does she do? Her torches light the way through the underworld. They show you secrets. They show you the thing that is hidden. With this mysterious box that is not supposed to be opened, this is a woman who is carrying around all of these secrets, all of the things about mortal life that cause us anxiety, and everything about having forethought. Okay, if humans are made somewhat in the images of the gods, and if they have the characteristics of Prometheus, if they have this ability to have forethought, or perhaps, like Epimetheus, afterthought, nonetheless, the whole idea of mortals having thought, these represent the torments of having thought. This is the torments of consciousness. In a world where we are conscious and aware, we like to think that our consciousness is something that sets us apart, that makes us in some ways superior to the rest of nature, superior to everything that comes out of Earth, makes us the lords or makes us the caretakers of everything in the world. That somehow, because we have this awareness, that we are smarter. Similarly with the Adam and Eve story. Before they eat the forbidden fruit, the fruit is from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's the knowledge of opposites. Right? And so if you live in a world, as they say, without kakoi, without evils, then you're not living, very similar to the Garden of Eden story, you're not living in a world that is really truly within the field of time. Or at least you're not aware of it, because you're not living in a field of opposites. You're not experiencing opposites. You are only knowing good, and you are not knowing labor. It's a life of ease. And the similar thing is implied in the Genesis story, because the idea is that once one has eaten of that tree, of the forbidden fruit, now you know difference, and now you are in a world where you have to labor and toil, whereas previously you did not. And similar thing is implied by Hesiod's Works and Days with the Pandora story, that you are in fact this knowledge of this side of life, this aspect of the psyche and of the body. The body is subject to death and mortality. And we also need to remember that Prometheus and Epimetheus are the children of Iapetus, who is the titan of death, of violent death particularly. And so now this is something that comes to mortals. And in this myth, it comes out of a jar that is held by a woman who has come up. She's given the gifts of all the gods. She is this representation of wealth and abundance and beauty, but she rises up out of the ground. She's chthonic. And things of the chthonic realm show us the underside of things. Even in Egyptian mythology, where you have a male earth, the idea is that the earth is flat, and then you have the life that you are living above ground, and that there is this complete reverso world on the other side. Not a little bit different in its conception from the night journey of the bark of the sun god, but there is this idea of this kind of flip world where those that live there, presumably the souls of regular people, might like eat feces and dirt and things like that. It's this dark place, and it's all of the stuff that's underneath it. If we think about our reaction to filth and decay and to things like that, these are actually the elements out of which things are built. That was the alchemical idea, that out of this either base metals or out of the crap of the earth is how gold is produced. Right? There's this dual nature to material wealth. It can provide us with luxury. It can provide us with pleasant experiences, just as love can. Love can be a beautiful, ecstatic, pleasant thing. This is why people want it, right? But it also can provide all of the opposite. It can provide pain and misery and toil and anxiety because we have forethought, because we have consciousness. We have a conscious mind, and our conscious mind is something that is subject to that kind of torment. Being conscious just doesn't mean like everything's cool and wonderful. I mean, it could be, but the nature of these thoughts, which to me, I feel like, along with perhaps disease and other things, these are the demonic beings that torment humans. And they are all the things that keep us from really being totally happy. There's rarely a time that we can ever really escape from the mind. Think about how difficult meditation is. I mean, to totally silence the mind. To be human and to be alive and to be aware is to be in a state of constant misery. Because even when you're happy, even if you're in the moment of something, it's generally just a moment. And as soon as you become aware of it and start analyzing it and dissecting it, it becomes something else. Or at the very least, even if it doesn't become something particularly bad, it doesn't become something as interesting. So that mystery of expectation, perhaps that hope, is maybe the only thing that is still mysterious and that is still hidden. Perhaps an allusion to the fact that, maybe we like to have predictability, right? We like to know the outcomes of things. We want to know that if we're going to do stuff, that we're making a good choice, or that we know what the outcome's going to be. But at the same time, it's often been said, life without any kind of mystery would not be interesting at all. So to me, the hope in the box is almost more that expectation, or that little unknown factor of what's behind, door number 3. what's there that perhaps we don't see, that might actually be something good. But we have the anxiety that maybe it won't be either. So this also got me thinking a little bit when I think about the myth of Pandora, about the myth of Psyche, because if we're going to talk about the soul, and we're going to talk about Pandora as kind of a projection of the male soul, and this frustration because loving a woman in this case, a man loving a woman in this case, it brings with it all of this other potential misery. And having a life of this way, when giving birth to children is always a dangerous affair, and a painful affair. And when you decide to marry someone and stay with them for life, that can bring its own set of trials and tribulations. And of course, the way in which men and women interact, it's really, to me, it's not so much that women are just so terrible, but more the idea that women are something that, in spite of any injunctions about a woman's role in a woman's place, women are not really controllable. Because even a woman who submits to, say, marriage and family and follows the script could still be a woman who nags her husband, or who makes his life difficult, or threatens to run off with another man, or there's all of these things that can still happen. And the thing is, there's the feelings that men have towards women, and the fact that they cannot control those feelings, and that they cannot control the woman, is something that gives them great frustration. This is one of the trials of the Anima. The Animus has its own trials in the reverse. But it's interesting, and you have to think about that in connection with the difficulties that men seem to have in connecting with women. Even today, maybe even more so today, because there's a certain mystery to femininity. If you just want to look at woman in her biological terms, as having a womb, as having the potential to create life, okay, to breed other humans, there's some great mystery to that as well. But the whole nature of love, it's antithetical to what we think of as reason. I mean, it's not a reasonable process. That's why I always find, I don't know, dating services and even things like that, I find them to be, they're a bit of a joke. Like the whole eHarmony thing that they used to have, right? Maybe they still have it, I don't know. But the whole thing of like, oh, we're going to match you on these X number of points, and that person's going to be a great match for you. Unfortunately, that's not a determinant of love. What is going to cause love between two people is more just like, oh, do we like the same things? Is that person physically attractive to me? There's more to it than that. And oftentimes, sometimes you will see the weirdest couple combinations where you think, oh, how come those two are together? But the relationship is good and it works, right? It's not always what we logically think should be a match is sometimes what is a match. So, in any case, this does make me think of the myth of Eros and Psyche as well. And Psyche has one thing in common with Pandora. And that is, when she is set to her tasks by the goddess Aphrodite, she has a totally different story where she is in this palace that Eros brings her, where she is totally unconscious of him. She's surrounded by invisible beings. She doesn't get to see him. He slips into the bedroom and makes love to her at night, but she never sees him. She's not allowed to, but, he seems awfully nice. I mean, he's very seductive, and he's more of a drama of the Animus, right? This mysterious figure, he can know her, she's not allowed to know him. And of course, that's the bane of the unconscious relationship, right? The unconscious relationship isn't a real relationship because the two of them don't really know each other. That's the projected relationship. Okay, and then once the projection's withdrawn, if you still look at that person and say, well, I still love that, care about that person's still a friend, I still love that person anyway, even though I haven't, projected this idealized view onto them, then you have a shot at having a long-term relationship. You have a shot at true love. But it's always a crapshoot sometimes, and then in a lot of times, what ends up happening is that once the projection's withdrawn, that both parties lose interest, and that's the end of it. And it's sad because then people feel rejected, or they say, oh no, what's wrong with me? Why, am I not attractive enough? And it really has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what's been projected onto you, or perhaps what you've projected onto the other person. So yeah, so there's this kind of a thing. But Psyche, once she is separated from Eros, and now she mourns him and she wants her love back because now she does love him because now she's actually seen him. Now it's a conscious relationship, right? Not an unconscious one. Aphrodite, who's ticked off about the whole affair, decides to come and give her all of these terrible tasks that there's no way she can complete. But she does have these other helpers that come in. Like when she has to sort all these seeds, this whole group of ants comes trooping in, and they sort all the seeds into the different piles, and Aphrodite's just furious because she knows she's getting help, that she couldn't do it on her own. But the soul is supported by all of these other figures. She's supported by nature, right? She is this embodiment of the feminine. She's supported by nature. She is a natural being. I just did a podcast for Patreon on different aspects of the soul, and we talk about the soul versus the spirit, right? The connection ideas, and these were ideas that did exist. Certainly ancient Egypt had their very complex conception of that. But this idea of the soul as being something that is more earthly and attracted to more earthly desires and earthly things. This is why I connect Psyche and Pandora in this kind of a way. And what Psyche's last task is to go into the underworld. And when she goes there, she is to fetch a box of beauty cream from Persephone, queen of the underworld, to bring back to Aphrodite. But once she gets back into the upper world with this box, she can't resist opening it. She has the box she's not supposed to open. And that also is a trick, because as soon as she opens it, she falls unconscious. But at this point, Eros steps in and stops his mother's torment of her, and the two of them are brought together again. But Psyche has to go through the underworld. She has to go back to that place of shadow. She has to confront... she has quite a few tasks associated with the underworld. I think she has 4. One of them has to do with the seeds. One of them has to do with a wild, ram that she has to get this golden, fleece off of. Not to be confused with Jason's golden fleece, but she has to get this from a very angry animal. And so basically, she has to wait till nighttime when the animal is asleep before she can go retrieve this wool. And then she is asked to retrieve water from this one crag on the river Styx, which is a river around the underworld. There's a lot there that's connected with the land of the dead. Okay, life and death are close. Birth and death are close. Love and the ecstasy of love is something that people have said is close to death. Right? There's a connection there, and so she has to make this journey. That this is the journey that one makes for true love, and it involves this kind of passing through the underworld. In a way, it's almost a feminine kind of myth of heroics. If you want to look at love and connection and vulnerability and emotion, the pursuit of that being a kind of heroic quest in and of itself, as opposed to I'm going to go out and kill something, right? It's just, this is kind of another version of it. But they both have to retrieve this box. They are both embodiments of the soul, and they have to kind of pass through these things, or they are tempted by this box or by this jar. And it's the woman who engages in the taboo act that pushes a situation forward, that transforms a situation from what it was into what it needs to be, or into exposing what its reality is. That is the reality of mortal life. They may not have experienced it up to that point before Pandora's little pithos was opened, but in opening the pithos and that release from the jar, that's actually the reality of mortal life. That is the conundrum of consciousness. That's the conundrum of being aware. We can do all these beautiful, wonderful things, have all these great experiences and all these innovations and thoughts and creativity with our consciousness. And more often than not, it's actually just the thing that keeps us awake at night, that torments us with, catastrophizations. Oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? Oh, I have this now, but do I have enough of this? Do I have to do that? I mean, the way that our mind runs constantly, the way we're worrying all the time about our perceptions of things, about how other people perceive us, about all kinds of things. This is the thing that is connected with this. And it's that desire for one's opposite. It's that projection of the soul that makes us want to connect. This is all the pain of connection. It's the pain of knowing that there's separation and having and wanting to have that connection. I seem to remember years ago when I had a conversation with Judy Harrow when she was still alive. She had said something about love, and she said, well, love always ends at some point. She says, even if you are with a partner for your entire life, one of you is going to die at some point. Nobody is together forever. And that's really a lot of the pain of this, is just that you are here. You can experience something in a moment and then it could be gone. And when we are consciously aware of that, and we are in constant state of anxiety about, what horrible thing could happen next, or even, like I said, even in the face of good things, or we're expecting a good thing and maybe it didn't turn out to be as good as we thought it was going to be, right? Yeah, there's quite a lot of this. This in human thought and in the way that we think. So, in any case, I'm going to probably sum up, because I know I can wax on and on these podcasts, but I feel a bit like okay, when we're looking at the myth of Pandora, you have a very grumpy Hesiod who's relating this myth to us, and again, it's been said that this myth does not necessarily originate with him We have this Pandora figure who seems to be a kind of earth mother. She rises up out of the earth, even though she is created by all the Olympian gods, but she is created to be deceitful. Okay? And you have to remember, even Hesiod thinks the muses are deceitful, right? I mean, there's just this idea that it's almost that Piscean idea. Okay, sorry to keep referring to astrology here, but that idea that which we can imagine and dream and fantasize about, that bubble can also equally burst, and we can be left in a place of self-doubt and not being grounded or knowing what's real and what isn't real. And certainly the conditions of love, or even just the way of things that we often see with groups of women, where they can be very, very judgy of each other. They can smile to your face and say, "Oh, hi, yeah, you look really great," and then behind your back they're going, "Oh my God, did you see that?" Like there's a way of that. I think it was a workshop I was doing today. We were saying, they were talking about the idea of relationships to men and relationships to women, and I was recalling a friend of mine who had said, she says, if I had to work in an office full of people, I would rather it be men. She was a computer programmer. She said, when you work in an office full of women, they're all like, sitting there, giving each other the eye and, saying things all the time and gossiping about people. She goes, guys, because they just punch each other in the arm and they're playing Doom or whatever. At the time she was saying this, that's probably what they were playing. Probably other gaming now. But they're not, they don't get involved in all of that other kind of stuff, which again is not always true, but that tends to be something that when you see groups of women get together, there tends to be this almost competitiveness that goes on there, which is actually a quality of the animus. It's a quality of the feminine version of what Jung would call the soul. He felt that women naturally had all of the good qualities of a soul, and that the masculine side of the women was the one that was problematic. Not because that's often misinterpreted. People will read it as, oh, he just thinks women are opinionated and women should keep to themselves. And it's like, no, that's actually not what he means at all. He means that aspect of women is the one that tends to be very judgy, and that it is that male component within her, interestingly enough. He said because it gets together and it analyzes and it makes judgments and measurements and it measures people against each other in certain ways that he said are just not helpful to anybody. And that is probably the truth. And I don't know, maybe men do this. I think men may do this to some degree as well. It's not like one of these, nothing's ever unilaterally, if you're a man, you absolutely have this other feminine thing. And if you're a woman, you absolutely have this way the masculine behaves. The interaction of those things is far more complicated than that. But if we're just talking about the soul as that which connects us to life, as that thing which lets us enjoy life, lets us be conscious of living day to day, most of the time we're not living. We don't spend our time living. We spend our time worrying about the past, worrying about the future, and not really being in the present and enjoying where we are and what we have. So really Pandora's jar represents all of those things that have given us cares and given us woes. I feel like it's more of a psychological myth. It's the curse of forethought. When Prometheus as forethought brings fire to human beings, okay, which is not only something that warms and heats and nourishes life, but, we can also think of fire as inspiration, right? You can also think of fire as that which spurs us to action, that which is, the fiery spark in us, right? Or even the divine spark. It's something that there's something divine about it. And he's the one that brings that to humans. And he is the one who creates humans in a certain image, and humans have the forethought of Prometheus. But there's a curse with that forethought, because you are always perpetually hyper aware to the point that your mind never actually lets you rest. And I think, and of course the body can get disease and breaks down in spite of our best efforts. So yeah, there's a whole lot of that around Pandora. But to me, she is the kind of prototypical soul image. And she represents the psychological conundrum of encountering the soul. And that, to me, is at least that's the way I would interpret her. There are certainly other interpretations that one could have of that myth. But between that and I think her connection to Psyche, the one who does the taboo thing, and in doing the taboo thing, in revealing the mystery, in revealing the thing that's supposed to be hidden, it can bring misery, but it also brings transformation. So thank you so much for listening. If you do enjoy this podcast and you are not subscribed to my Patreon, please consider subscribing at patreon.com/Chthonia. All of my work currently is on the Chthonia.net website. I just migrated and I was looking at it in a few other places, and there's some issues with the photos and stuff that are not where they were when I actually set the site up. I had to migrate it recently, so I have a little work to do on that. But nonetheless, you can get the podcast episodes there. There's a podcast plugin from Spreaker, and there's also a list of all my publications and books and things I have for sale. There is a blog on there, but I have not really had a chance to update it. But generally, yeah, that's sort of the hub of what I'm doing. And I have links out to my other projects, Transition Life Coaching, Institute for the Study of Feminine Myth, and that sort of thing is also there as well. I am on social media, Chthonia Podcast, one word, on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And so like I said, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already in any one of those places. Thank you so much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.